Hello everyone. Welcome to today's talk. I would like to introduce you to Ivy and Rebecca, and they will be talking to us about today what is this color, creating a scalable and collaborative color system with material. Ivy Knight is a designer and a designer advocate of the material design team. She focuses on partner engagement and material tooling for adoption of material design to create beautiful apps on Android. And Rebecca Gutteridge is a senior developer relations engineer at Google, focusing on Android system UI. She is a strategic leader in the interactions of engineering and design and works on driving high quality apps. Before coming to Google, Rebecca was a vice president at Goldman Sachs. Rebecca graduated from the University of Oxford with the Master of Chemistry. Outside of her core work, Rebecca is a Girls Who Code mentor and a TILS volunteer. Thank you, Ivy and Rebecca, for being here today. And to everyone joining our this session, we will have a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to leave your questions in the chat and we will answer them afterwards. So you can start whenever you're ready. I will leave it.
Great, thanks for the intro and welcome to What is That Color? Where we'll be discussing some of the latest material design and Android updates. We're also wanting to show how those updates can help you build a more adaptable and scalable color system overall. And not only that, also help with your design and developer collaboration with some of those new features and tooling. So thanks for the wonderful intro. Today we'll also be going through more of a scenario as a designer and developer, showing how that can work, all of this can work within your own process, and also demoing a bit. So I'm Ivy, designer and designer advocate in material design.
Hi, and I'm Rebecca. I'm a developer relations engineer on Android, and I'll be the developer.
So Bex, did you get those latest updates I sent you for the app?
Yeah, I did. I'm worried that it looks like it's going to be quite time-consuming and complicated to implement.
Well, I've been updating them for the latest Material 3 guidance, or M3, but I don't think it's going to be that complicated. And there's some brand new features that would really help us along, and I think would help us across multiple platforms even. So I don't know if you saw last year, Material Design 3 was announced along with the Material U features, and they look so personal and cozy and bring a new spirit to material design. Along with within Material U, there's the personalization concept and dynamic color. And that dynamic color is kind of what I wanted to chat with you about today. So as you know, with our current app, we use the M2 Android color slots, and we have the hex codes hard-coded in there. But that's not the only thing that I have to worry about with designing. I also have to worry about multiple color guides and specifications along multiple platforms, so we support, along with other external contexts like the brand guidelines to make sure those are rolled in. And we have several semantic colors in our palettes. All of this means more manual specifications and creating new assets and deliverables, which can be rather time consuming. And that's not taking into account if we want to add a new theme, like adding in dark theme. We have to generate those ourselves too, making sure those colors are just right. But with dynamic color, or the ability to algorithmically generate a color palette or color scheme from a user's wallpaper or specified source color, this could help quite a bit. And the features that power dynamic color would be a great addition to our processes.
So how does this all work?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. So a color using dynamic color algorithm can be pulled or extracted from a user's wallpaper on certain Android devices. Or a source color can be manually chosen. That source color is then generated into 5 key colors: a primary, secondary, tertiary, neutral, and neutral variant. Those key colors are then taken and then shifted along 13 steps, only shifting tone into tonal palettes. These tonal palettes both have light and dark schemes that can be generated from them. And within those tonal palettes, certain steps are then extracted to generate color schemes, both light and dark schemes. Those certain steps you'll see are what used to designate the different color roles. For example, primary 40 is the main color for the primary role, while primary 80 is the main color for primary and dark scheme. There's also corresponding on colors, primary and on primary containers, and the neutral and neutral variants tonal palettes are what are used to generate the background and surface color roles. So all of this creates a full light and dark accessible color scheme. And designing with tone is crucial if you want to keep accessibility in mind with color contrast. So here, for example, we have some UI just picking a hue, different hues to apply to that UI. But when the color contrast is examined at grayscale, there's no contrast at all. And this would be failing accessibility color contrast checks. So that's where those tonal palettes come in and why it's so crucial, because they guarantee at least a 60-degree step between each of the colors that are chosen for those color roles. So in some instances, they're even going above and beyond the WCAG color contrast guidance to assure accessibility. So again, when we're assigning only with hue, and then that same UI, but now designing with tone in mind, you see it's fully accessible because of that contrast. And the dynamic color algorithm does this automatically for this. So again, that's taking out a big step for us.
So you were mentioning there about tones and chromas. Can you explain this to me? This sounds all quite new. What do you mean?
So it is new. Right now, we use several different color spaces, and those color spaces like RGB have been around for decades now, and they don't quite live up to what our new standards are. So material design created a new color space called HCT, and that is what we use for the M3 color space. So first, let's clarify some terms here. When I talk about hue, that's a color in its purest form. So when I say red, green, blue, that's not usually what we're talking about when we're saying hue. Chroma is the intensity of that color, or sometimes it can be confused with saturation, but chroma does have a maximum intensity depending on the hue it's coming from. And then of course, tone. Tone is the lightness or darkness of color, and that's what is shifted during the tonal palettes, and the hue is left alone.
So that sounds really cool, but how do I go about actually applying it to an app?
Glad you asked. So we can not only apply it as we discussed with the Material U personalization, so extracting a color from the user's wallpaper on their device to influence the app, but we can also create a custom color scheme, say with our brand colors or with some semantic colors we have, to create not only that custom scheme, but also it's suggested to create that to fall back to in case the device does not support dynamic color. And of course, there's the tried and true baseline material purple color scheme that we can use for prototyping still, or if we just need that baseline. Additionally, the dynamic color algorithm can also work with content. So we can use that to pull the same color schemes and generate from content within our app to influence the UI. And this doesn't have to be all or nothing. We can pick and choose where the this goes. So say if we want a more personalized moment on a profile screen, we could have that screen influenced by dynamic color while the rest of the app is influenced by our main custom scheme. Or we can even build out a theme only for dynamic color or that personalized color. So to give the users truly more influence over our app and even more customization. There's a lot here to offer. So just to reiterate, we can either pull, say, a tertiary color from the wallpaper, or I could assign that color, source color, which then is taken through the algorithm, generate a tonal palette in there with certain steps, both the 100 and the 40 chosen here for light. That's assigned to these color roles in the color scheme. And these color roles act as design tokens. So here, tertiary container is the tertiary container design token or token. And that is assigned to the label. And that's how actually this dynamic color works. So we have a color always changing. The design token or the token is always the same, regardless of, and we're not hard coding that value underneath. So for another example, in this green and blue themes, we have tertiary container, surface, and background. Those names are always staying the same. And that's how we can communicate too, regardless of where that value is coming from. The wallpaper, our custom scheme, another theme that we decide to apply to the app, a semantic color, anything. It's always there and it's always the same. Because right now we have our hard-coded values for each platform. And again, that's a lot to specify. But with design tokens, we can, no matter what, if the color value is shifting, we can still use that same token. And it can be used across multiple platforms and then back into the design tool. So for example, within our own app, we have this color container for some of these routes. So we have light and dark scheme, but it's always color container all across, whether it is in either theme. And that can really help us on design and dev handoff, because that's how we can communicate a little bit easier. If I say primary or secondary to shift to, we can just change that, and it doesn't, and we don't have to worry about what the hex value is.
That sounds pretty cool. But is there anything to make it easier in terms of, creating a wonderful design color system for your app and then like handing it over to me?
Yes, there's even some new tooling. So why don't I just jump into Figma and show you what I found. So here's my Figma file. And let me show you the material theme builder. So I'll open the plugin after installing, and I've been playing around with it a little bit already. So the material theme builder will actually generate all those material design tokens that we need for our app. And they create them, both text and color styles, as Figma styles. So they can work within any of my mockups. So here I have just the default material theme. And I could help me visualize dynamic color within our mockups. And I can even input a new wallpaper or an image, or even add a piece of content like key art and generate a scheme from there. Or I can pick the source color. Or let's just avoid all of that and kind of shuffle through to see how it works a little bit. So as I'm shuffling through the colors, you can see from the color schematic that is generated from the theme builder, the key colors are populating and changing. The tonal palettes are generating from this, and it's generating full, again, light and dark color schemes, along with the surface values to help me design. And these are the surface elevations. So we also have an addition of surface 1 through 5 here. along with the full material type scale. And these are also assigned Figma styles that I can assign to them. But enough about that default. Let's jump into our mocks and actually create a custom scheme for our own app. So you can add as many themes as you want here, and we can switch between them even. And then we can also reset to baseline if we need to. So I've created our theme here called Where, and switching over to custom to generate a new scheme. Let's open up primary. Here we go. So as you saw when I swapped over to our theme, I didn't have a color schematic generated for it, and it is now done that. So I have my key colors, my tonal palette. So let's open this up. And so within the theme builder, we've actually provided the HCT color picker. So you can even work within that new HCT space to specify colors. You can specify your colors as hex values, or you can even manipulate the hue, chroma, and tone of a color. So our main brand color is this green color right here. So we're going to specify that. That's going to populate in any second now. There we go. And in addition, since this is a transportation app we have here, we have some additional semantic colors for our things like our routes and transportation types. Well, the theme builder and the color scheme overall does handle extended colors or custom colors here. So I've added in our bus and our train one and even renamed them here. And they do appear as Figma styles, and they will even generate out into the color schematic. So I have those here. Within screen sharing, come on. There we go. I want to move that. Okay, so you can kind of see here with one of our mock-ups, we have the map, and we have, this one is assigned to material theme within our selection colors in the panel on the right. But we want to assign this to our custom theme. So let's swap those out, and just by hitting swap in the theme builder, and ta-da, it's updated with our custom scheme. And you can see here that it's now even our theme prefix here. Oh, but we have these cards right here that need to be assigned. So we can do that. So this is how we go about first setting up our mocks too. We're going to find our theme, and then that's actually the train. So we can even search, we could search by our theme name, or we can search extended train. So let's assign these to color container. And that should be about everything. So we have this, but what about dark scheme? Well, as you saw, dark scheme is generated. So let's duplicate this real fast and then come over here to next to swap to dark theme and hit dark theme. There you go. So I have instantly, I have a full color scheme, tonal palettes with light and dark, surfaces, type scale, and these are linked. So I could even take these and add them in and link up my current deliverables, and those could always update instantly too to create more accessible design assets. But I also have two mockups here, both dark scheme was generated instantly. And I can do this along with dynamic color and create additional themes if I needed to. And that all took within the time of this demo. So, and that's not where this stops. What about implementing this? Well, Bex, I know you just rebuilt the app in Compose. So let's export this into a Compose theme file. So there we go. That's downloaded. And I'll pass this file over to you.
Thanks, Ivy. So let me go ahead and show what this looks like from the developer's perspective. So now my wonderful designer, Ivy, has shared with me the export from Material Theme Builder plugin within Figma. I'm glad you appreciated the trick. So in that export, there were 3 files. There was a colors file, a themes file, and a typography file. For the purposes of this demo, we are not going to show the typography file. So let's go and have a look at that colors file. So in here, you will see the theme that was the colors that were automatically exported from the Material Theme Builder. So I, as a developer, do not need to worry about the nomenclature nor what actual color that maps to. And as you can see, this has generated the scheme, both the light and dark theme that Ivy created. And so then let's go and check out what that looks like from a themes perspective. So as Ivy mentioned, this is a Compose app that we're looking at here. So we're creating 2 light and dark schemes within Compose. So as you can see here with the light color scheme, you see the mapping with the tokens of primary on primary container, all the way through to surface and background and surface tint. And so this is a light color scheme, and similarly, you create the same thing for dark color scheme. This is all done using the normal light and dark color scheme from Android Compose, and I'm using the Material 3 import. And then what's particular about dynamic color? So as you can see on my emulator, I am running, at the moment, I am running Android 13, the latest build that's going to be coming out and stable at the end of this year. And as you'll see that my icons and my clock widget are kind of themed dynamically with my wallpaper, with blues and purples being the main color scheme. So how did we get that? So for the phone and for your app, you can set a dynamic color variable where you go and check for a build version more than Android 12, also known as Android S. So here you can basically programmatically choose whether your app is going to be using the dynamic color theming or the default custom theme that Ivy created. So here you can see that there's logic of if there's dynamic color and a dark theme, let's go ahead and apply the dynamic dark color scheme. Otherwise, let's go and apply the dynamic light color scheme. And if all else fails, let's go and apply the default light and dark color scheme. So here, the dynamic dark color scheme is inheriting from, again, an Android Compose Material 3 library called Dynamic Color Dark and Light Scheme. So the power of using these tokens means that by default, if you have tokened and identified each aspect of your app with those tokens, then as the wallpaper is changing, your tokens will dynamically update. So if, for example, I now open up this app, so I have this Jet app and we're looking at a messaging section for the purpose of this demo. So in the user input file, I have this composable, which is controlling just this portion of the screen. You can see that I have this button where I'm importing and setting up all the button features for that composable. So if we remember at the beginning of the presentation, Ivy was talking to me about whether I had seen some of the updates, and now the conversation is going to be much simpler. Just watch.
Hey, so we did some user testing, and we found out some of the buttons are possibly conflicting with each other on the hierarchy. Can you make that send button secondary instead of primary?
Yes. So as you can see here, I had configured the send button to be one of the primary components. And if we wanted to go ahead and just for the purpose of this demo, I've got my button colors configuration here. I can actually go and set this and now to be the color scheme secondary. And this automatically will be able to pick up this change that Ivy was talking about. So if I go ahead and rebuild this, I can actually go and pick up that new change. So whilst that's loading, I will just flip over to the slides and we'll see how you go about configuring the rest of dynamic color within the phone and the app. So what about the rest of the device? So as you saw in Android Studio, the widgets that I was showing and the adaptive icons were also themed with that dynamic coloring. So here you can see what that looks like for these three. So how do you actually go and do that? So for the adaptive color icons, if you target Android 13, you will be able to get the same experience that you might have seen from some of the some of the Google first-party apps on Pixels of having those themed icons. So here you need to import that SVG as a vector drawable, and we can go into how do you get your designer to help you do that. A one-line code change of in your adaptive icon, you now want to set this monochrome tag, and then target Android 13. So for designers, what does this look like? So for designers, we also provide specifications on how you go about doing this. So for a designer, we share that you need the SVG, the background color doesn't matter, and it should actually be set to transparent. And this allows it to be able to pick up that dynamic coloring as the wallpaper is changing. And so enabling your user's phone to feel harmonious and beautiful and personalized based on their wallpaper. And we also showed the clock. So there are kind of two ways that you can build widgets. You can build it with the classic widgets API, or similarly, you can also use the Glance Alpha, which is a new declarative style of building home screen widgets. So here I'm showcasing Glance because it'll be a great opportunity to showcase the latest and greatest. So here again with Compose, Glance, you're able to set that color and set the colors to be dynamic coloring. So here we're setting the dynamic light primary. So very similar concept to those tokens that we were talking about. And similarly, how you can go and set the background to be another dynamic color light attribute. So again, using the power of tokens means that conversation between the designer and the developer becomes simpler. And from a developer's perspective, I now no longer need to think about ever setting up colors or hex codes or anything like that ever again, which is wonderful. So let's see whether we are able to actually showcase these changes. So if I show you now, I can show you what the adaptive icon looks like. Apologies for the switching between screens. So to show those adaptive icons, if you typically would have had the code change here, so here I have this monochrome Android drawable IC themed icon attribute, and that's the one line code change that I need to make. And then thankfully Ivy shared with me that SVG that I imported as a vector drawable, and I have this IC themed icon. You see here, this vector drawable is actually a little transport icon, which is powering that themed app icon. So let's head on over to the summary. So we went through a lot today. So I just wanted to summarize everything that we went through. So first of all, finding a common language. It's a classic problem that some developers and designers have on being able to seamlessly interact between designers and developers. And you can see the power of those tokens. So for me, having those Android tokens of primary on primary, and then mapping it one-to-one with what Ivy is creating in Figma reduces that friction. And they're no longer like a hard-coded attribute they are now a dynamic, pure, like from a programmatic perspective, these are now like dynamic variables that I'm able to set and configure. The second is the sharing the learning. So obviously we're constantly learning, and we want to build that shared knowledge and understanding between designers and developers, and understand why is it that the contrast ratio needs to be a certain way, or why is it that that token needs to be changed from primary to secondary. And similarly, checking out the different processes and tools. So we showcase to you dynamic color, the color extraction API from Android, the material color themings, the material theme builder, and then on Android Studio showing the emulator, showing that dynamic color. And hopefully these tools will prevent siloing and redundancies. So no longer are you having to create separate themes and separate attributes for, say, light and dark theme. You're now able to scale to n number of theming. So with that, thank you very much. Hopefully you guys have some questions, but if you don't have them now, also feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. We've left our Twitter handles here. And yeah, open up for any questions, and hope you enjoyed our presentation.
Awesome presentation, Ivan and Rebecca. We loved it. Loved how you presented everything. There is definitely one question. Feel free to leave any questions that you have in the chat, and we will answer them now. Deandra is asking, how do you have fun with colors but still try and honor accessibility standards?
Interesting question. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility with the color contrast standards in general, but kind of making that, we want to make sure that we're designing for everyone, and that itself can be a lot of fun and almost its own challenge. And trying to kind of push beyond, maybe if you have a brand color that is very in the middle for tone and chroma, then it's hard to get a contrast in. Maybe find out where you can tweak that or push back on and challenge that idea of, well, does this even need to be used as, say, like our primary buttons everywhere? Maybe we can use that in a different way. So and then I think there's a lot of flexibility within there too, and just have fun with it. Make sure you're designing for everyone, and that can be the greatest joy.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think also as well, for me as a developer, I'm always worried that I'm not meeting those standards, and I'm heavily reliant on basically my designer to kind of do that for me. And something that I have really enjoyed is within the dynamic color framework and that color extraction that we were talking about, built in that is like the basic standards that we as Material and Android see as like the bare minimum of contrast ratios that you can have, which is actually a pretty high standard in the industry. So I can feel more relaxed as a developer knowing that if I'm changing something from primary to secondary, I don't necessarily now need to like go through a new accessibility code review or something, because that's kind of baked into the algorithm.
Great. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. So do you have any recommendations in terms of tools? As I understand, Figma is one of them to kind of bridge that gap. Do you have any other recommendations to kind of bridge the gap between developers and designers, or tips?
Yeah, not so much tooling recommendation. I can say that the Material Theme Builder it's if you want more granular kind of control and then connecting them to your mockups, the Theme Builder plugin is available in Figma, but there's also a web version of the Material Theme Builder where you can kind of just get an overall view of dynamic color with sample app mockups and build out that custom theme still. And so it will show you if you input your key color, source color inputs, and then it'll show you the tonal palettes and color schemes, etc. And you can still export those too. So if you just need that flow, that's there for you. But overall, of course, we're using Figma here, and kind of recommend for this flow. But I say really that's where kind of evaluate your own process and your team how y'all work together and kind of discuss and meet and do a bit of user research, there within your team, and find out a tool like do y'all prototype more, like design prototype more. There's plenty of tools out there that are prototype first. There's more UI first. There's some that have lean in more a little bit heavier in documentation, and then there's of course specification tools. So kind of evaluate where your team is at or how your team likes to build things, and sometimes having less exact or more exact mockups is important or less important.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer. And finally, do you have any resources that you could recommend for someone to dive a bit deeper into the material space?
Yes. Head over to m3.material.io for more information about Material 3 latest guidelines. And then, of course, developer.android.com for the latest of Android specifications. There's dynamic color API info there, but there's on the material guidelines, it walks through the color system and the new color roles and how to assign those, how to appropriately assign those too.
Can you write those? Okay. Can you repeat them, or I can write them if you wish?
Yeah. m3.material.io is where the M3 guidance is. And then android.com. Android.com is, of course, the main Android guidelines.
Great. Awesome. If there aren't any other questions, thank you so much, Irene and Rebecca. This was an amazing talk. And thank you, everybody who joined.